Hello and welcome to the Daily Aus. I'm Lucy.
I'm Zara.
Rebel forces have taken control of Syria, ending the Assad family's 54-year regime. Bashar al-Assad has reportedly fled to Russia, and international governments have said they'll work to stabilise the country as it enters a new era. In today's deep dive, we'll explain how rebel forces took over Syria in just 2 weeks' time and what could be next for the Middle Eastern nation.
Lucy, there's a common saying that there are decades where nothing happens and there are weeks where decades happen. And I think it is fair to say that the last week that just passed in Syria is the latter. It feels like more history has happened there than the years that preceded it. We have had the government toppled in the country of Syria. Take me through how we actually got there.
Well, in kind of the broadest outline possible, for the last 24 years, Syria has been ruled by Bashar al-Assad. And before that, it was led by his father, al-Assad, who led the air force in the country and who came to power in the 1970s by overthrowing the previous president, who he then jailed indefinitely with no charge and no trial.
So the Assads as a family have had control of Syria for over 5 decades.
Exactly, for 54 years exactly. Bashar, who I'm going to refer to as Assad going forward, that's the main Assad that we're talking about. He was Hafez's second son. He was actually training to be an optometrist in the 1990s when his older brother died, which effectively made him the heir to Syria's presidency. And then when his father died in 2000, Assad took over. As president, his main allies were Iran and Russia, and he received military support from both of those countries. Following peaceful protests against Assad's government in 2011, which was part of the broader regional era known as the Arab Spring, Assad's government cracked down on protesters and other civilians. This crackdown then spread into the Syrian civil war, which was between the Syrian military and anti-government forces. As many as 600,000 civilians are believed to have been killed during the 13 years of this war, and 12 million people were displaced. Fighting in Syria had stalled in recent years, but all of that changed late last month.
Yeah. Okay, so let me just do a bit of a recap. Bashar al-Assad comes to power in 2000, and for a number of years he is ruling this country in what can be described as a dictatorship. He then faces opposition in 2011 as part of a broader democratic push across, the broader region. At that point, he starts to crack down on protesters. Those crackdowns become violent. Protesters are killed, as are other civilians. And that really kickstarts a civil war that has raged for, many, many, many years.
Yes.
And it had always existed, but perhaps hadn't been in the headlines as much as it has in, as you said, recent weeks. It then reached the headlines because we saw a group of rebel forces, and we just need to distinguish. So we've got the government, which is Assad and his people and his military, and then we've got the rebel forces.
Yeah.
And the rebel forces started making moves to take over the power in the country. Can you tell me a bit about these rebel forces before we then go into what actually happened?
Yeah, so the main thing that we know about these rebel forces is that they're kind of a coalition that are led by one main group. That group is an Islamist militant group called Hayat Tahrir al-Sham. This group was set up in 2011 under a different name, Jabhat al-Nusra, and was originally connected to the group al-Qaeda.
Yeah.
Former Islamic State leader Abu Bakr al-Baghdadi was also involved in creating the group. So the group has since cut ties with al-Qaeda. It's now led by a man named Abu Muhammad al-Jalani. And late last month, this group leading this coalition of rebel forces captured and took over the northwestern city of Aleppo.
Yeah.
And following that, al-Jalani gave an interview to the New York Times where he said that his aim was to, quote, liberate Syria from this oppressive regime, speaking there about Assad.
I do think it's important just to add here that Australia, alongside a bunch of other Western nations, do consider this group to be a terrorist organisation. But you said that they were key to capturing Aleppo. They were leading this group of rebels who captured Aleppo. And then on the weekend, they moved into Damascus. Can you tell me a bit about what actually took place over the weekend?
Yes. So they moved from late November from Aleppo to Damascus over the weekend. The speed at which they moved has been attributed to a lack of resistance from Syria's military. And one reason that has been given by international analysts for this is that Syria's military, as I said before, is supported by Iran and Russia. These two countries are currently involved in other conflicts.
Yeah.
And international analysts say they haven't been providing as much support. That's one of the reasons that's been given. And what that has looked like is that the rebel forces have been able to move through to the capital and were able to take the capital more quickly than they otherwise might have been.
And so that happened on Sunday. And it was this very dramatic, seeing the headlines kind of filter through. It was firstly that they had captured the city, but then in mere minutes, it looked like the government had been overthrown and that Assad was out.
Yes.
We did see a video statement posted by the group who said, this is over. This is now ours. You started this by telling us how much power and how long the Assad family had been in power for. What's happened to Bashar al-Assad now?
Hello, Billy here from TDA. We have just looked at our YouTube analytics and 95% of you who are watching our videos aren't subscribing. If you want to help independent media like us grow, the best way you can do that is by pressing subscribe. Thank you so much, and back to the video.
We haven't heard anything publicly from Assad. It's been reported by Russian state media that he and his family have sought asylum in Russia. That means kind of legal protection.
Yeah.
And as we know, Russia is an ally of Assad. But yes, so far the only people we've heard from have been the rebel forces. We've also heard from Syria's prime minister, so Assad's second in command.
Yeah.
He's a man named Mohammed Ghazi al-Jalali, who's publicly said that he's ready to assist with a transfer of power to...
Which is quite remarkable.
Quite remarkable.
Like, he is part of Assad's government, and he came out with this really clear statement saying he'll do whatever needs to be done.
He effectively said, I'm sitting at home waiting to be told where to go in order to make a transfer of power happen.
It has been really remarkable to watch. And I think one of the dominant scenes that seems to be sticking with me are these videos of prisoners who have been freed from prison and are walking around on the streets, celebrating, screaming, holding up fingers to symbolize the length of time they had served in prison.
Yeah.
Can you just give me a bit of color on that, why that seems to be such a big thing in this whole story?
Yeah. So under both Assad and his father's regimes, people were routinely, and it was certainly widespread, imprisoned for speaking out against the government, for helping someone who spoke out against the government. The prisons that people were held in had what are described as horrific conditions. Human rights groups have said that executions were routine, torture was systematic, neglect, disease, starvation. The conditions were, according to human rights groups, very, very extreme. The United Nations, in a 2021 report, described Syrian prisoners as, quote, forcibly disappeared. They said that they included men, women, and children. One of the prisons that the rebels opened is called Sednaya Military Prison. It's near Damascus. And in 2017, Amnesty International called that prison a, quote, human slaughterhouse.
And so that's just a really clear, I guess, demonstration of how much and how quickly things have changed.
Yeah.
That there was opposition to the Assad government and the way that was dealt with was through a prison, and now these have quite literally been opened.
The locks have been shot off the gates.
Yeah. I mean, it's remarkable. Can you just tell me a bit about what we're hearing domestically about how people are taking to this news? Because, it's one thing to be sitting in Australia reporting on this.
Yeah.
Another, of course, to be living through it. What have we heard from Syrians?
So we know that there has been a lot of celebration to see prisoners released. These are obviously political prisoners.
Yeah.
We have seen quite a lot of vision of refugees who had been living in Lebanon, neighbouring Syria, coming back through the border into their home country, including literally walking with their suitcases across the border into Syria, effectively saying, we can return home now, it's safe.
And of course, there have been millions and millions of displaced Syrians as a result of this civil war, which, as you mentioned, has raged for so long.
We've seen a lot of celebration from the Syrian diaspora in other countries. countries. One thing I've just seen is that the Syrian national football team has actually changed their logo as a way of supporting the possible new government, kind of suggesting what the new flag of the country might look like. And UN Special Envoy to Syria, Geir O. Peterson, said, quote, "Today we look forward with cautious hope to peace, reconciliation, dignity and inclusion for all Syrians."
Obviously, so much remains unknown. What do we know about what this sort of transition of power could look like?
So the UN and the US are expected to lead a process to set up a new government. US President Joe Biden said the US will assist with that process. And I should note that the US has had troops in Syria since 2014, and it's reported that US troops assisted at least one of the groups involved in the rebel coalition. And like I said, the Prime Minister has said he's ready, willing and able to transfer power to a new organisation, a new government.
It will be so interesting to see if and when Assad comes out and says something publicly. You know, will we perhaps never hear from him again if he remains in Russia? It's a very interesting story, a very complex one with decades of history behind it. So thank you for explaining that, Lucy. And thank you for joining us for another episode of The Daily Aus. If you learnt something from today's episode, why not send it to a friend? It's those small things that help an independent media company like TDA grow. We will be back again later this afternoon with the headlines, but until then, have a wonderful Tuesday.